Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be looking at a pretty interesting interview, actually, with Orlando Bloom.
Oh, wow.
And it was on the Jay Shetty podcast.
Okay.
Now, you might know him as, Legolas or Will Turner.
Right.
From those big blockbuster movies.
Huge.
But this conversation goes way deeper than all that.
I think it's always so interesting when we get these little glimpses into the inner lives of celebrities that we think we know.
Right.
And this one really brings out some interesting stuff about his personal philosophies and how his Buddhist practice keeps him grounded.
Yeah, and this was something that I really enjoyed, kind of getting into his views on relationships as well.
Absolutely.
So I guess one of the first things that kind of stood out to me was, this irony that we're presented with right from the beginning, where you have Orlando Bloom, the guy known for these epic action roles, reveals that he actually struggled with terrible stage fright as a kid.
Really?
It makes you wonder if, facing those fears early on kind of paved the way for him to be able to take on those really demanding roles.
Makes you wonder if that was essential to then go on and star in a docuseries called The Edge, where he's tackling all sorts of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he even tells this funny story about a childhood ballet recital where I think he said he was 4 years old.
Oh.
He's in a monkey suit.
Oh my God.
And he gets an itch and he's like, okay, I can scratch this discreetly.
Yeah.
And of course the whole audience sees him and starts laughing.
Oh, there you
go. Talk about facing your fears on stage.
Right. But I mean, even though it's funny, it does highlight something important, which is that even someone who we might perceive as having it all, like Orlando Bloom, still has those moments of awkwardness and vulnerability, and none of us are immune to that.
Yeah, and it makes you realize how much I think our early experiences really shape us.
Yeah.
He also talks about his challenges with dyslexia and likely undiagnosed ADHD as well. And it's kind of fascinating how he connects those experiences to this need to push his own boundaries.
It's like those early challenges almost instilled this need to prove to himself and maybe to others that he could overcome these things.
Right.
Yeah.
And that leads us to, I think, a pretty pivotal point, which is discovering Buddhism at 16.
Wow.
So he was, feeling isolated after he moved to London for school, and a friend introduced him to the practice.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is he kind of describes Buddhism not really as a religion, but as more of a practical roadmap.
I feel like a lot of people find that with spiritual practices.
Yeah.
Especially if they're going through a period of transition or uncertainty. They need something to kind of give them some structure and make sense of the world.
Yeah, and for him it sounds like that's exactly what it did. He even credits chanting with helping him to focus.
Really?
And actually lead to some unexpected success with his art exams.
Interesting.
He was struggling with sculpture. And he said that chanting really helped him to tap into this flow state where he could really concentrate and connect with his art.
That's powerful.
And he ended up with the highest grade in the country for his final piece.
It's almost like a tangible example of how these mindfulness techniques can have these real world results.
Yeah.
It's not just about feeling good. It can actually, improve your performance.
Yeah. I love that you bring it back to how can the listener actually use this? You know what I mean?
What are the tools that we can all use to kind of unlock our own potential?
Right.
Because we often hear about these things in the context of celebrities.
Right.
But they're really available to everyone.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a Buddhist concept that Orlando discusses.
Okay.
Which I think is particularly relevant to his experience in the spotlight.
Okay.
Which is the 8 wins.
The 8 wins. Okay.
Have you heard of this?
I have.
Okay, so just to recap for our listeners.
Yeah.
The 8 wins refer to praise, censure, honor, disgrace, pleasure, suffering, prosperity, and decline.
Right.
It's basically all of these external forces that can knock us off balance.
Emotionally.
Yeah. And I think it's a really useful framework for understanding how we react to the ups and downs of life, especially if you're someone like Orlando Bloom, who has dealt with this intense public scrutiny.
Right, because he talks about, he skyrocketed to fame in his 20s after Lord of the Rings.
Huge, yeah.
And it was really intense. And he talks about feeling like his character was being dragged through the tabloids, which ultimately led him to embrace social media as a way to control his own narrative.
it's so interesting how he kind of took that control back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he could have retreated.
Right.
But instead he was like, no, I'm going to engage, but I'm going to do it on my own terms.
Yeah, and you see that kind of proactive mindset again in his docuseries The Edge, where he's really pushing himself to the limit with all of these extreme physical challenges, but he's really clear that it's not just about adrenaline.
Yeah.
He describes the whole experience as a human experiment.
Oh, wow.
To see how much pressure he could handle before cracking.
It's like he's asking himself these really profound questions.
Right.
What are my fears? Where are my limits?
Right. Yeah.
What does it take to truly trust myself?
Yeah, and I think he makes a really good point about how everyone's edge is different.
Totally.
So for some people, it might be skydiving. For others, it might be, getting out of bed in the morning or walking to the kitchen.
Exactly, and I think that's such an important message.
Right.
Especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with these images of other people's seemingly perfect lives.
Right.
And it's a good reminder to just focus on our own individual journeys and what constitutes a challenge for us.
Yeah, he stresses the importance of being present and grateful.
Yeah.
In all experiences, whether it's the rush of jumping out of a plane or those, quieter moments of everyday life. It's all about finding that sense of wonder and appreciation, even in the mundane.
Absolutely. And he links this idea of presence to an experience he had with plant medicine.
Okay.
Which he did with the intention of understanding the feminine.
Okay.
He had been kind of reflecting on his relationship with his mother.
Okay.
And wanted to kind of explore that part of himself more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And he came away with these really profound takeaways.
Okay.
He realized the importance of, being grateful for his life.
Yeah.
Nurturing that, creative and artistic kind of feminine energy within himself. And treating every encounter as if it was his last.
Oh, wow.
Making it meaningful. And while plant medicine isn't for everyone, I think these takeaways are so universal.
Right.
It's really about, living intentionally and appreciating every moment.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And that brings us so beautifully to the topic of relationships.
Yeah.
Which is like a major theme throughout this whole interview.
Yes, yeah.
And I think relationships are often where our deepest fears and insecurities kind of come to the surface.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they act as these mirrors.
Right.
Reflecting back the parts of ourselves that we maybe don't always want to see.
And he introduces this really powerful relationship criteria.
Yeah.
Feeling safe, seen, and celebrated.
Oh, I love that.
And he actually uses this as a green light test in his own life.
So he's actively using that in his relationships.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So as we move forward, maybe we can think about, because while his green light test is great, relationships are complex.
Oh, yeah.
So what are some other factors that we might consider when evaluating, the health of a relationship?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, food for thought as we continue this deep dive.
I love it. Okay, so stay tuned. We'll be back with part 2 to explore more of Orlando's insights on relationships, letting go of control, and this beautiful metaphor of two trees growing as one.
Can't wait.
Yeah. Welcome back.
All right, so we left off talking about Orlando's green light test for relationships.
Yes.
Which is all about feeling safe, seen, and celebrated.
It's such a simple concept, but it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And I think it really speaks to this need for authenticity and vulnerability in our relationships. He's really saying you shouldn't settle for anything less than feeling truly accepted and cherished for who you are. Yeah, and he talks about how relationships really force us to confront those deepest fears and insecurities.
It's like they're these mirrors that reflect back at us.
Yeah.
The parts of ourselves we maybe don't always want to see.
Right.
It's
so easy to get caught up in that, romantic ideal of finding someone who completes us.
Oh, totally.
But the reality is relationships challenge us to grow and evolve in ways we never could have expected.
I mean, it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it's through those challenges that we discover our true potential.
And he even shares this story about attending the Hoffman Institute, which is this week-long program that focuses on personal growth and emotional healing.
Wow.
And he went through it after a difficult breakup.
Okay.
And it sounds like he came away with this renewed sense of self-awareness and a clearer understanding of what he wanted in a relationship. You know, it's just so inspiring to see someone in the public eye who is willing to do that kind of deep inner work.
Right.
You know, it kind of challenges that notion that celebrities are somehow immune to the same struggles that all of us face.
It reinforces that idea that personal growth is this ongoing journey.
Absolutely.
It's not like you arrive at a destination and then you just stay there.
Yeah.
It's about continually showing up for yourself and being willing to do the work even when it's hard.
Totally. And I think that's where discipline comes in.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we were talking about discipline earlier in the context of technology and the digital age.
Right.
But it applies to relationships as well. It's about making conscious choices that align with our values.
Right.
Even when it's easier to just take the path of least resistance.
Right. And he talks about how discipline helps him to stay grounded and present in his relationships, especially amidst all the demands of his career.
Oh, for sure. And the distractions of, you know, modern life.
He's really suggesting that discipline isn't about deprivation or rigidity.
Right.
It's about creating structure and routines that actually support our well-being.
Right. Which is, you know, something I think we can all benefit from.
Absolutely. And he credits his Buddhist practice for helping him apply these principles in his own life.
Yeah.
But particularly the idea of letting go of control and accepting imperfection.
Yeah. He believes that every relationship, even the challenging ones, offer us valuable lessons and opportunities for growth.
And that is, I mean, that's a core tenet of Buddhism.
Right.
But it's also just such a practical approach to life.
Right.
By letting go of our need to control the outcomes, we open ourselves up to the possibility of deeper connection and greater understanding.
Yeah, and sometimes that means accepting that not all relationships are meant to last forever.
Yeah.
You know, he even talks about how his past relationships, the ones that ended, have contributed to his growth and helped him become a better partner.
I think that's such a refreshing perspective.
Yeah.
You know, in a culture that often glorifies forever after.
Right.
It's important to remember that every relationship, regardless of its duration, can hold value and meaning.
Absolutely. And that brings us to this really poignant point in the interview where he talks about how becoming a father to his daughter Daisy has profoundly changed his perspective on relationships, particularly with women.
It's amazing how parenthood can just shift our priorities and really deepen our capacity for empathy.
He even goes so far as to say that every man should have a daughter before marriage.
Interesting.
Because it teaches them to embrace a full spectrum of emotions without judgment.
So it's like a crash course in emotional intelligence.
It's like fatherhood has given him this whole new understanding of the feminine. And helped him to become more attuned to those emotional nuances that maybe he wasn't picking up on before.
It really challenges those traditional gender roles and expectations.
Right.
It suggests that men can benefit so much from nurturing a more empathetic and emotionally intelligent sides.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if having that experience of raising a daughter first could lead to, you know, healthier, more fulfilling relationships later on.
It's an interesting hypothesis.
Yeah.
For sure.
He talks about watching Daisy go through this roller coaster of emotions with such intensity and authenticity, and how it's taught him to just be present with those feelings without trying to fix them or control them.
That's such a valuable lesson for anyone, regardless of whether they're a parent or not.
Yeah.
It's about creating that safe space for emotional expression. For ourselves and for the people that we love.
It reminds us that sometimes the best thing we can do is just listen with an open heart. And offer support without judgment.
Beautifully said. And he emphasizes this importance of presence in all aspects of life, whether it's being fully engaged with his children, appreciating a quiet moment in nature, or even just savoring a cup of tea.
Yeah, it's about cultivating that awareness of the present moment, even amidst all the busyness and distractions.
Yeah, it's so easy to get lost in our thoughts or worries or, you know, the endless scroll of our phones. And we just miss out on the richness of the experience that's unfolding right in front of us.
It's that call to mindfulness, to slow down, tune in, savor the simple joys of life.
And what's so interesting is he connects this idea of presence back to his experiences with extreme sports. He says that while those activities provide that rush of adrenaline
right.
and that sense of pushing his limits,
yeah.
they also require this intense presence and focus.
It's almost like even those activities that seem so outward focused can be deeply introspective as well.
Absolutely. He talks about how in those high-stakes situations, he has to be completely present.
Right.
Trusting his training, following the protocols, being acutely aware of his surroundings.
Otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The consequences could be pretty dire.
And I think this is such a powerful metaphor for how we approach any challenge in life.
Yeah.
Whether it's skydiving or navigating a difficult conversation, it requires that mindfulness and intentionality.
And throughout the interview, he keeps coming back to this importance of gratitude.
Yeah.
Even for the difficult experiences that have shaped him.
Right.
Which really resonates with that Buddhist principle.
Yeah.
Of finding wisdom and compassion in suffering.
Yeah.
Recognizing that even those painful experiences can be these really valuable teachers.
He talks about how his early challenges with dyslexia and ADHD really forced him to develop resilience and a strong work ethic.
It's like what we perceive as weaknesses can often become our greatest strength when we learn to kind of embrace them.
Totally.
And use them to our advantage.
He also expresses gratitude for the lessons he's learned from his relationships, even the ones that didn't work out.
That's such a mature and evolved perspective on love and loss.
He's not dwelling in the past or assigning blame. He's choosing to focus on the growth and wisdom gained from those experiences.
And I think that brings us to one of the most powerful takeaways from this entire conversation. He says that the most valuable thing we can do in this life is make those around us feel safe, seen, and celebrated.
That's beautiful.
I know. It's like a call to action, urging us to be more intentional, more compassionate in our interactions with others.
He goes on to say that if he can leave this world having made even just one person feel truly loved and appreciated, that would be a life well lived.
It really gets to the heart of what it means to live a meaningful life. You know, it's not about the accolades. It's not about the achievements. It's about the impact that we have on others, the connections that we forge.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into Orlando Bloom's conversation with Jay Shetty, we'll leave you with this final thought to ponder.
Okay.
If you could make one person in your life feel truly safe, seen, and celebrated, who would it be? And how would you do it?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Keep diving deep.
And we are back for the final part of our deep dive.
I feel like we could talk about this interview for hours.
I know. There's just so much in here.
Yeah, there really is.
But in this last part, I kind of want to focus on his experience as a father. And particularly this belief that he has that every man should have a daughter before marriage.
That's a bold statement.
It is. It is. But when you hear him explain it, it kind of makes sense. You know, he talks about how raising a daughter really teaches men to embrace the full spectrum of emotions without judgment.
It's like a crash course in emotional intelligence.
Yeah, he describes it as like fatherhood has given him this whole new understanding of the feminine. And it's helped him to become more attuned to all those emotional nuances that maybe he wasn't picking up on before.
It really challenges those traditional gender roles and expectations. You know? And suggests that men can really benefit from nurturing that more empathetic, emotionally intelligent side of themselves.
Yeah, it makes you think if guys had that experience of raising a daughter first, would it lead to like, you know, healthier, more fulfilling more relationships down the line?
Yeah, it's such an interesting hypothesis.
I think so. He talks about watching Daisy go through this roller coaster of emotions with such intensity and authenticity, and how it's taught him to just be present with those feelings without trying to like fix them or control them.
There's so much wisdom in that.
I think so.
For anyone, you know, parent or not. It's just about creating that safe space for emotional expression.
Yeah. And sometimes the best thing we can do is just listen with an open heart and offer support without judgment.
Beautifully said. And he also talks about this importance of presence in all aspects of life.
Right.
You know, whether it's being fully engaged with his kids, appreciating a quiet moment in nature, or even just savoring a cup of tea.
Right. It's about cultivating that awareness of the present moment, even amidst, the craziness and distractions.
Yeah, because it's so easy to get lost in our thoughts or our worries, or, the endless scroll.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Of our phones, and we miss out on the richness of the experience that's right in front of us.
It's that call to mindfulness, to slow down, tune in, savor the simple joys.
And what's so interesting is he connects this idea of presence back to his experiences with extreme sports.
With extreme sports,
He says that while those activities, give him that rush of adrenaline and that sense of pushing his limits, they also require this intense presence and focus.
It's fascinating how even those activities that seem so outward focused can also be so introspective.
But like that common thread throughout all of these different areas of his life.
He says in those high stakes situations, he has to be completely present.
Right.
Trusting his training, following the protocols, being so aware of his surroundings. Otherwise,
the consequences could be dire.
Yeah, and I think that's such a powerful metaphor for how we approach any challenge in life.
Yeah.
Whether it's skydiving or navigating a tough conversation, it requires that mindfulness, that intentionality.
And throughout the interview, he keeps coming back to this importance of gratitude, even for the difficult experiences that have shaped him.
Right.
Which really resonates with that Buddhist principle of finding the wisdom and compassion in suffering.
Right. Recognizing that even those painful experiences can be such valuable teachers.
Absolutely.
He talks about how, his early challenges with dyslexia and ADHD forced him to develop resilience and a strong work ethic.
It's amazing how those things that we perceive as weaknesses can actually become our greatest strengths.
Totally.
We learn to embrace them and use them to our advantage.
He also expresses gratitude for the lessons he's learned from his relationships, even the ones that haven't worked out.
I think that's so powerful.
It is.
Such a mature and evolved perspective.
Right. He's not dwelling in the past or assigning blame. He's choosing to focus on the growth.
Yeah.
And the wisdom gained from those experiences.
And I think that leads us to one of the most powerful takeaways from this whole conversation. He says that the most valuable thing we can do in this life is make those around us feel safe, seen, and celebrated.
It's so simple, but so profound.
I know.
Yeah.
And it's like a call to action.
Yeah.
Urging us to be more intentional, more compassionate in our interactions with others.
And he says that if he can leave this world, having made even just one person feel truly loved and appreciated, that would be a life well lived.
It really gets to the heart of what it means to live a meaningful life.
Right. It's not about the accolades, the achievement.
It's about the impact that we have on others, the connections that we forge.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Orlando Bloom's conversation with Jay Shetty, I think we can all take away some really valuable insights about how to live a more present, more mindful, and ultimately more meaningful life.
Beautifully said.
And we hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
Yes.
And we'll see you next time.